And so I wanted to begin by asking you a couple of questions, prompts, and you can just share whatever comes to mind. But the first is just understanding that this has impacted all of us across the globe in different ways, and probably some things will never be the same. And so I'm curious if you feel like there are certain things that have changed and they're not going back to the way they used to be.
Well, first, Rabbi Jenny, thank you for having me. It's such an honor. And I felt so supported from Beth Meyer, but really the whole Jewish community through this. And I felt their support as I was at press conference after press conference doing these things. And it, our Jewish values ground us so much in wanting to heal the world. And I thought of that often as we tried to, find our way through a really challenging time. And we're not done yet. That's the hard part. So I'll try to glean some lessons here, but it almost feels like we're just turning the chapter here, and we're not at the end of the book. But I do think that there have been incredible things that come in times of crisis. And sometimes crisis brings those opportunities. And I was thinking about how proud I am of the scientific community and the fact that, in 18 months, we were able to understand this disease, create a vaccine, distribute it to this entire country, and we're working on the whole world, manufactured those millions and millions and millions of doses. I mean, it's an incredible feat from the science to the manufacturing and the technology that went on to it. So I was thinking about that, and I think the way we approach diseases in the future will never be the same scientifically, which is fantastic. I mean, it's a really big scientific achievement, even as we think about boosters and the next rounds of things. But that in and of itself. But I think more than that, I hope that what COVID has shone a light on are some of the racial and ethnic disparities that we're seeing in the health space, and the co-occurrence of the COVID pandemic and the conversation that we had about racial equity at the same time, I hope is going to, has certainly shown a light on the problem and has, I think in a good way, helped us focus on solving that problem. We have a lot of work to do to solve that disparity problem, but I have seen it certainly change the way I work, the way public health works, the way we think about our time and our resources in historically marginalized communities, using our data to make sure that we are understanding problems and we don't paper over them in aggregate, that we really understand what's happening in our African American community, what's happening in our Hispanic community, our Native American community, and so that we are really being thoughtful about the needs of all different kinds of communities. And I see that not just in public health, but I see it in a lot of different aspects of our lives. And I am hopeful that we are going to learn some lessons about equity through this, and that they will stick. But they're hard lessons, but they're going to take real, and in order to really learn the lessons, we're going to need a lot of intentional effort going forward. But that has certainly been something where in this crisis, I think it has given us that opportunity, I think, to refocus energy in a new way.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as a clergy person, I see the way in which the veil has been lifted even more for some. Some have been aware for a long time, but even more so that these health disparity outcomes, they're also, we have something to say and contribute and be a part of the solution as a community organization, as a religious faith-based organization. All of those things exist throughout all the spheres of our country. And so we've seen the beginnings of some of those changes and look forward to helping be a part of a movement for healing and repair.
Yeah, I think it's in health, it's been in education, it's in access to the internet, right?
Absolutely.
It's in all of these pieces. So we obviously have a lot of work to do in terms of thinking about racial justice, but I think that is, I hope, will be one of the important lessons we learn from all
Amazing.
of this.
Yes. So along those lines, if you think back on just the arc, and I love that you said that this is not over. I mean, I wish it were over. I'm sure you wish it were over. It's not over. We're still in process, but that is also part of the human experience and a part of a spiritual life is that we're never done. We're always continued to be working, and Yom Kippur calls us to be more awake in that process. When you think about where we've come, what would be one loss that just feels like we can't look away? And also, what's been one blessing?
Oh, God. Immediately, obviously, when you say loss, I think of the 13,000 North Carolinians we've lost to COVID in the last 18 months. I think the 50 people we lost in the last 24 hours, which is heartbreaking to me when we now have vaccines and we have treatment and and we've learned so much. That the lives lost to this has been terrible, but it does show that I'm really proud of North Carolina's work. That number is big, but I know without all of the hard work of all of us together, unfortunately that number would have been much, much, much bigger. And so I feel really proud of the work that we have done to save lives, and made some very hard decisions that impacted everyone's life, and it was not easy in any way. Impacted the way our kids went to school, the way we moved through the world, and what we wear on our face. But that was a big the lives lost, and some of it hit our family personally, like every family, and friends, and so it was a hard year for everyone, and that was certainly the loss. But the blessings, I think, come in. I find joy in when I can, particularly as I think about that work and coming together as a team. And I think of that more than just my team in public health and my department, but it was such a team effort to come together. And I know it feels like a divisive time, but I saw a lot of unity through this. And it was hard to see sometimes because you only see the fringes or the louds at the, but there's a lot of folks who were looking out for each other and trying to just help each other through this in small and large ways. And that's just, that's incredible.
To remember
it's
that
incredible.
We're all on the same team
exactly.
at the end of the day is such a gift.
Yeah, and I think people will do realize how interconnected we all are, and in so many ways. And that's incredible to see, and I'm so proud of my team's work and how they have come together as a team. So many leaders have been made in these last 18 months, and I'm just so proud of them. And so like I said, crisis brings those opportunities, sometimes in your professional life, sometimes in your personal life. And it's been a year of blessing even through all that hardship.
Beautiful, thank you. If you think about the wisdom, some of the Torah, so to speak, Torah in that Torah Chaim, Torah of life kind of way that's helped ground you through your own challenges as a leader, what comes to mind?
Oh, so I was talking about Tikkun Olam and healing the world, but for me, a lot of how I thought about leading through this year has been about how do I establish trust? How can I have folks trust me and our work, and that when we ask them to do hard things and turn their lives upside down, it's for this greater good, and and how do we do that? And I thought of the way you need to communicate constantly, communicate, and you have to be transparent, and you have to, and some of that comes in showing people numbers. Sometimes that's showing people stories. And I think that all links back to, again, some of our values in the Jewish culture about how you come together, you share, and it builds that community and that trust. And I think that is so important as you try to lead through a crisis like that. So I think about trust every single day in my job, and how do you foster that? And I think it's any community that wants to build those bonds thinks about that trust, and how do you both build it and maintain it. And so using different ways in which I think about transparency and communication to make sure we get there.
Just listening to you, I'm thinking about the Torah itself, in our prayers, which we repeat over and over and over again. And sometimes the messaging isn't any different, but how we feel it, we need to hear it again and again, and we're changing as we take that in. There's, I guess, some eternal wisdom about the power of communication and repetition. So finally, I wanted to ask you a little bit, just in this moment, about how you've seen your own sense of personal purpose align with this greater sense of purpose in your leadership.
Well, one, I want on the personal side, I think more than ever before, I've realized I can't do this alone. And I've been so grateful, as I was saying, the support of the whole community, but I do want to acknowledge the support of my husband, Sam, who's just been
God bless him.
Unbelievable through this. And just to show how, powerful, that that partnership is, and I've been so blessed and lucky that he's been in my life, and not just as a support for helping the kids through it and like make our house run, but he was really a partner with me through all of this, and I'm so grateful for that. And just realizing, I think earlier on in my career or my life, I could do it. I could do it alone. I don't need anybody. And this year, this crisis was too big for anyone.
Yes, for any human.
And so it wasn't, him, but also my family, my friends here, that many of whom are here at Beth Meyer Synagogue, have just been incredible to support me. And so that was growth for me personally, in realizing it's okay to not have all the answers all the time.
Yes.
It's okay to need help from other people and accept that help. And they give me the strength to realize I could do more than I thought I could do. And
absolutely.
but we're still learning and growing.
Yes.
So,
Well, that is wisdom. I too am learning in life, and I think all of us, as we get older, we have the opportunity to lean into the support around us and realize that to make great change, we can't do it alone.
Nope.
There is a line in the very beginning of Genesis that it's not good for humans to be alone. And it's so true. So I'm so glad that you are with us and we are with you.
Yes.
Thank you for spending this time with us, for sharing your heart and your wisdom, and of course your service.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It's a blessing.
Wishing you a good, healthy new year for you and your whole family.
Thank you. We need a new year.
Yes. Amen. Amen. All right. Thank you, Mandy.
Thank you.
And so we're thinking about some of the wisdom that COVID has brought, despite its difficulty, and in particular, seeing that there are things that have changed that are unlikely to go back to the way that they were. And so I'm wondering, as you think about the field of education and the realities of education in our country, how has COVID impacted our world and the reality of education, and what do you think is here to stay?
Sure. Yeah. So I think every parent, everyone knows that there've been a lot of shifts in the past year and a half, and a lot of challenges, of course. But a couple things that come to mind. First are that COVID kind of opened up what we could do with teaching and in K-12 schools in particular in ways that we hadn't explored before because we hadn't had to. So a lot of the remote learning and things like that, which was a big challenge. It was difficult for schools, especially like big school systems and things, to shift quickly to an all new way of teaching and learning. And excuse me. I think that so it wasn't seamless by any means, but we did realize a lot of possibilities. My particular area is in early literacy, and especially with young kids, we were spending so much time trying to keep them off screens, and then all of a sudden that was their way of learning. And so one of the things that I think we saw was, our children can engage in this way. They can learn in this way. There are a lot of new technologies emerging that can be helpful for learning, but not at the expense of some of the in-person experiences and putting their hands on books and paper and pencil and things that they also need. So I think we were able to kind of see some of those possibilities while also knowing the limitations and the challenges. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's gone. I think that remote learning will be a part of our schools from now on. And At the university, we've used online classes for years now, and I think it's definitely a lot more conducive to older children. But it gives a lot of opportunities for kids to access educational opportunities that they may not be able to access, you know, in their local community or something. I think a lot about the early college experiences and high school kids being able to take college courses and things like that. So I think it just kind of opens up what we can do and how we can connect with people, and kids can have those learning experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen that in my own family. So I'm wondering if you think about one blessing and perhaps one loss that's come with this time. When you think about the field of education, what comes to mind?
So I've worked with a lot of teachers across North Carolina, and in particular I work with teachers in a lot of rural school districts and high need, lower resource school districts in, you know, the eastern part of the state and so forth. And I think there's been inequitable opportunity in a lot of those ways that has always been there, but that has been exacerbated or made apparent by the pandemic. So I think about like one wonderful thing that teachers and families saw when they were doing remote learning was that families just became more aware of what their kids were doing in school and more involved. So there were more opportunities for parents to share, you know, what's going on in their family or community. And again, with the young kids, so maybe they're reading a recipe together or writing a grocery list and bringing in some of those family experiences and traditions as part of the learning. And the parents said, oh, you know, they could listen in on what books are you reading in school, or what are you learning about in math. So there was really an opportunity to engage families in a new way that that we haven't always either, you know, as educators, we don't always have the time or the opportunity to kind of connect so often with families. And of course, there were some challenges, and I think the biggest one, again, that comes to mind is some of the digital divide and some of the connectivity and access issues in some communities, including in particular rural communities, where literally there wasn't Wi-Fi available, much less, you know, does every family have a device at home and so forth. And so that meant that not everyone was able to connect as often or as well. Some of our teachers were sending home packets of work instead of engaging every day with the kids. So there were definitely some learning opportunities lost, some time lost, and I think you know, teachers are very resilient, as are kids, so they're very much aware of that and working right now to make sure everybody's caught up and everybody is kind of feeling included back in schools and things like that. But there's definitely some time lost as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate the way that you connected the blessing and the loss, because they're both sort of magnified. The blessing of having caregiver involvement, but then also like how profound it was to see when caregivers can't be there and integrated into the learning in the absence of that in person. Like what a deep loss and challenge that is. So as you think about how you got through last year, both as a parent, as a human, and also as an educator, was there one piece of wisdom or maybe a couple of pieces of wisdom that you've learned along the way from parents, from family, from mentors that really grounded you and helped give you the strength and resilience to guide others?
Yeah, so I think about a colleague who is sort of a mentor to me. And one of the things that she encouraged me to do throughout the pandemic time, which is continuing, but you know, as it was more intense, was always to take care of yourself first in order to be able to take care of others. And I think we all do that with our families as parents, or you know, with loved ones and friends, but also professionally, especially in helping professions like teaching, where you're very concerned with the students or the people, you know, the people you're working with, but really that you had to take care of your personal, mental, and physical health to be able to be present for kids or for, you know, others. And so I just think that's so important, and I think that's a part of what we all had to learn, hopefully, over the past year and a half.
Yes, and I think it is true for all people who are caring for others, but especially people who have dedicated themselves to helping professions and forward-facing professions where you're always trying to meet the needs of others. It can be even more challenging to remember that.
Yeah.
And when you think about your own sense of purpose, I'm wondering how the experience of COVID, which as you said is ongoing, has elevated, shifted, helped you kind of align your purpose in a new way.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, there's a few things that I would say. One is one of my passions is really working with teachers, and it is sort of that, like, helping teachers help students. So in a lot of different ways, you know, teaching teachers at the university, but also providing professional development and supports to teachers. And I think this, you know, the COVID, with everyone being at home and feeling disconnected, and maybe some people not having access to all the resources they might normally have, or again, is exacerbating some of the challenges in some communities, that purpose became even more important. And, you know, we had to really be flexible to say, okay, so normally we'd have this professional development workshop. How can we shift this online? How can, you know, I work with literacy coaches. How could the coaches do virtual coaching and make it as effective and supportive as they typically would? So I think it just really was learning to be flexible and use technology, but also just be creative to make sure that, you know, our values or our goals were being met, even if it was if it looked very different than how we might have anticipated. So
beautiful. Thank you so much. I think even those who are in different fields will absolutely resonate with the ways in which this challenge has forced us to be more creative, because at the end of the day, like, we believe so passionately in what we do and want to continue to find a way to build that bridge to those we serve even during this time. So thank you so much for taking time to share with us and being a part of our community, and really for the work you do in teaching teachers, so that very much in line with Jewish values, that literacy is at the core of who we are and how we tell our stories, and how we have access to more knowledge. So thank you for all that you do.
yeah, thank you for having me.
So wanted to invite you to reflect a little bit on, I mean, COVID has changed our world in every possible area, but when I think about some of the most powerfully impacted areas, I think about the field of medicine and healthcare. And so from your own personal experience, I'm wondering what things have changed, and in particular, what has changed and is here to stay.
Right. Well, thanks, Jenny. So it's you know, it's obviously been a really strange year, really long year. And as you said, I'm in private practice. I'm in office practice pretty much exclusively. So, you know, our practice is independent and not part of a hospital or part of a network. So we're really seeing people in the office all the time and doing primary care, and I do a little bit of specialty work also in pulmonary. But you know, it's been interesting. You know, I mean, I feel for my colleagues who are in the hospital, but you know, we have a interesting perspective being in the office. You know, we're trying to get our patients to trust us to come in. I think the big change this year is how we trust one another.
Yeah.
You know, and I've been, you know, dealing with people, almost one person every day, who doesn't trust the science, and trying to talk to them about what I think about the science, trying to be empathic and trying to be understanding and hopefully be a little convincing without being overbearing. But it's a real dance in the office sometimes. You know, but you know, to be honest, I mean, the people who don't trust the science are really a minority. You know, the real trust issue, I think, is getting people to trust that we're keeping them safe when they come to the doctor. And you know, I mean, you have the same, I think every business has the same issue. The synagogue has the same issue. You know, how do you make people feel good coming back? We saw a big drop-off in people at the beginning of the pandemic, and people are still not getting all their screening tests and preventative care that they should, I think. And we're, you know, we're just trying to encourage people and show people that we're keeping them safe. You know, we've you know, really, when I talk to patients, it used to be, oh, you got a fever,
Right.
Come into the office.
Yeah.
Or you got a cough, well, let me check you out, make
Yes.
sure you don't have pneumonia. And now it's like, oh, well, maybe we'll do a video visit first, make sure you're not going to expose anybody else. Maybe we'll get you COVID tested first.
Right.
So it's we're trying to just have people who need to come in, the chronic care management people with heart failure and chronic lung diseases and hypertension and diabetes, try to make them feel safe coming in.
And when you reflect on, I guess it's called like telehealth, doing video conferencing medicine versus bringing people in, has that opened up new horizons for you? Does it make you just also appreciate what it is to be delivering healthcare person to person in the same space? How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's not as good.
Yeah.
I mean, the telehealth, it serves a purpose.
Sure.
When somebody can't come in, I mean, I have a couple of patients on hospice who can't come into the office, and having developed the telehealth for the pandemic, has allowed me to actually, talk with them at home, which is nice.
Yeah.
But it's not optimal. I mean, it's I can't press on your belly and see if you have appendicitis if you're on a screen.
Right.
So we need to, that's why I want to have people trust that it's okay to come back to the doctor and let us evaluate you.
What you can deliver in person is still qualitatively different.
Right. It'll still be around, but it will be second best.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think about this experience, which is obviously ongoing, COVID is not over, I'm curious if you can think of one thing that has just been a tremendous loss, and something else that's been a blessing.
Yeah. I mean, the obvious loss is the loss of life, of course, and I've seen that seen that in our small way, through our patients, but the loss of liberty of people who are in the hospital, and now it seems totally preventable.
Yeah.
I got a patient right now who's been in the hospital for 17 days on a respirator, and did not, chose not to get vaccinated. And I think of that as totally preventable, and it's just, a shame, that people are losing their freedom, losing their liberty by being in an intensive care unit for weeks.
Yeah. That's an interesting way to think about liberty these days. In the common discourse, we're thinking about the liberty of people, wearing masks, wearing face coverings, but people who are hooked up to a respirator, their choices get really small.
This is true.
Yeah.
So it's it's a loss. It's there's also, I mean, not to get pessimistic, but there's the loss of the population's health. I think people who've not been coming in and getting their checkups or getting their preventative services, it's going to lead to a less healthy population in the future and more work for us in the future. All these seniors who have been on lockdown and in senior living,
right,
have been less active, and I think that's taken a toll on some people.
Yeah. And what about a blessing? Maybe even just, beyond the office.
So, no, well, it is in the office. I mean, I think our team in the office has really come together over this. We've tried to figure this out together and help each other. We were able to get together in our office, with our limited resources to do a mass vaccination in our parking lot on a few weekends.
Wow. Yeah.
So we had like 400 people each weekend for a few weekends in the winter of our patients who got vaccinated.
Nice.
And we felt really good about that.
Yeah.
The thing that makes me proud is that our doctors, who are sometimes very opinionated and sometimes have trouble making a decision together, that just recently we all came together to decide that we were going to mandate vaccinations in our practice.
That's huge.
And it's it's sort of symbolic because most of our employees are vaccinated.
Of course.
But there are the few who
are
are
outliers.
not happy with that decision.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I'm even doubly proud of the fact that we made that decision a week before the FDA finally approved the vaccine.
Right.
So we had a little foresight on that.
Amazing. Amazing. So I'm sure this has been, I can't even imagine as a physician who's seeing patients day in and day out and managing your own anxiety for your own personal safety and your family and your loved ones. But I'm thinking about, obviously there have been things that have kept you going. And so I'm wondering if there's a piece of wisdom or advice you received over the years that has helped ground you through this experience.
Well, so I've had a long career, so I've had a lot of advice along the way. But I get taken back to training, which is like 38 years ago. I was in New York at Bellevue Hospital in New York City, at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic.
Wow.
So I've been through a lot of this. I think this is not our first rodeo.
Yeah.
And people, I think, need the perspective on that. I mean, my patients were dying left and right, back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it was going to be endless, and you didn't know what was going to happen in the future. I think about us talking. The interns would get around and joke about these older attendings who would do morning report, and they'd sit there and you'd have a mystery case and they'd say, back in the day, this could have been tuberculosis. And they'd start talking about how earlier in their career, they would have treated tuberculosis, and we'd be like, one day that's going to be us.
Right.
We're going to be old doctors and say, oh, this could have been a case of AIDS, back before the vaccine. We all thought that there was going to be an HIV/AIDS vaccine by the end of the 1980s.
Wow.
And then this was going to be our old time experience.
Right.
It's like the 2020s now. Where's the HIV vaccine? No vaccine.
Yeah.
And which is doubly amazing that in such rapid time we have a safe, effective COVID vaccine.
Yes, that really does help put into perspective what a modern miracle this is.
And it's just amazing to me that. But it's not just AIDS. I mean, I also did a pulmonary fellowship. Dr. Bill Harris was the program director at Bellevue, and had a lot of old tuberculosis experience. He's one of those doctors. We had a TB ward at Bellevue where we were starting to see multi-drug resistant tuberculosis.
Wow.
Another worry, infectious disease worry.
In another.
Right.
And your mentors had seen this in another format.
Right. I mean, we even had cases we had to discuss that there were some patients who either would not or could not prevent spreading their TB. And they were in the hospital for months on court orders, taking their liberty away while they got treated until they were no longer infectious to go back out on the street. Wow. And we had long discussions about that. You're taking away somebody's liberty, you're keeping them in the hospital, but balancing that with public health.
Yeah. Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much wisdom there. I'm even thinking about the Jewish story, at the Passover Seder, we say in every generation, there have been people who have risen up, and it is so easy. I know I've sat at many a Passover Seder as a young person thinking, really? We're safe. We're in a golden age in America as Jews. And I think there is incredible wisdom to just knowing that these things have a way of cycling and help us kind of hold the crises of the moment in a larger frame, both that they will pass and we'll find amazing, resilient ways to meet the challenge, but also to know that we always have to sort of be prepared in a way and not write off the possibility of these sorts of things coming our way. So John, I wanted to conclude by asking you to reflect a little on your own sense of purpose. You've been a physician for a long time. And knowing you as I do, you are just a person who cares deeply about humanity and individuals and as us as a community. And so I'm curious how COVID has perhaps changed or just reinforced your own sense of purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that it's different from any of the other doctors in the congregation, but I sort of get a lot out of being able to explain things in English and not get into doctor speak. So that people actually understand and take home what I'm trying to tell them, and it's it's one patient at a time that you do that.
Yeah.
So it's that's the fun of the office practice.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, I can relate to that too. There are so many big things that I hope to impact in my life, but the thing that I love most is sitting with one person at a time. So thank you so much for sitting with me and by extension, all of us.
Thank you for sitting with me.
And you're welcome. So wishing you a happy, healthy new year. Thanks, John.
You too.
So we're thinking about the wisdom that we've harvested during this pandemic, which, as we know, and you know in particular as a doctor, is still ongoing. For those that don't know, you are a pediatrician, but also have a parent coaching practice. And so I'm thinking about all the ways in which our lives have been turned upside down and changed, in particular for parents, in particular for in the world of health and health care. And I'm wondering if, as you think back on things that have changed, like what is something that you feel like is here to stay, for better or for worse, that's just been a profound change?
Well, probably the most profound change in my field, I can't speak for everybody, but has been the willingness of people to trust the internet and their communities more than their physicians. I think that, we're navigating something brand new that's full of uncertainty, a great deal of fear for some people. That coupled by doing that in real time, where we're naturally as scientists making mistakes and learning from them, which is really what science is. And then also, the political climate and social media have all really very powerfully shifted the narrative of what people think about the medical community, really undermined our health in many ways. And it's really hard to think of a way that our field is going to recover completely from that in some moments. So that's been a really powerful shift, I think, more than ever.
It's interesting. Another physician who is sharing with us as part of this experience was also talking about the issue of trust.
Yeah.
And so are there things that to me, this is, from where I come from, just like such an obvious thing. I was brought up with such deep reverence for doctors and for the healthcare as a institution.
Yeah.
And for the knowledge and the science. But are there things that you've done or you're actively doing to help build that trust? What do you think is at the core in terms of what you can do to combat some of those external influences?
Well, one of the advantages I have as a pediatrician is that, in order to really take care of a child, you really must trust their parents and have their parents trust themselves. I mean, when you see a child for a certain amount of time in the office, you're really already working very hard to establish a connection with a family that says, we need to trust each other. Yeah. And so I'm used to really navigating those waters with my families often, really listening deeply to what their experience is, even if I can't put it in the context medically of a problem, really hearing them, I think. And so, it's been quite challenging, but it's also been very intentional that I'm trying to understand and see people and meet people where they are, and try and understand exactly where their confusion is. It's very difficult to be a patient right now. There's so much information that's quite compelling. It's very difficult to tell what's true and what isn't true. And so just trying to not be confrontational in the office and really be a place of listening. I think almost always is a better strategy instead of the frustration that I think many people in the medical community feel, and I feel at times too, candidly. So I find I definitely, when I listen carefully in a really meaningful way, that my patients feel a stronger level of trust that is helpful sometimes.
And you're also highlighting the power of relationship that you have, and I so appreciate and admire your determination to, whenever possible, stay open and compassionate, so that ultimately you can make that connection.
Yeah.
So when you think about this experience over this last whatever, I don't know how you even begin to quantify this period of time, but when you think about this experience, I'm wondering how you might define a particular loss and a blessing.
Well, I mean, not to be redundant, but the loss of trust in science is probably the biggest loss for me, just professionally and personally. Just it's what our careers are built on.
Yes.
And so for me, that has probably been the one that I feel in my heart the most. The hidden blessing for me that I think will surprise some people is the loss of control. I think in my field, in pediatrics, parents often have this kind of illusion that they can curate this life for our kids that is comfortable and oftentimes happy, trying to prevent circumstances that might be painful, or trying to help narrate an outcome. And COVID really took that from us in a way that I think was wonderful. It was like a hard stop on the helicopter parent for a period of time.
Yeah.
It's like it's landed, And, I think that the way our children learn to handle pain as adults is having it as children and being with them in that moment. And, we say as parents all the time, we want our kids to be resilient, and resilience, it comes from surviving negative experiences. And I think if we'd said to all the grown-ups, like, what we'd like you to do is just stop rescuing all your kids from all their pain and just see how it goes, probably a lot of people would have been a no on that.
Yeah.
But that's really what we had to do. Like, we could not do anything.
Yes.
And it, for our kids to get the resilience they deserve, we have to step off. And so I don't think parents would have done that without this. So, and our kids have really been quite inspiring in adapting to change in a way that, frankly, most of the grown-ups have not been so good at. And I'm grateful that our kids got to have that experience, even though it might not have felt like a blessing at the time.
I mean, I resonate so much as a parent and as sort of in a way, a rabbi parent to this community. I see the way in which my own kids have done really hard things.
Yeah.
And I see the way that it's grown their muscles of their own sort of inner capacities to know that they can do other kinds of hard things and sort of hold those things in a larger frame. Is really, really inspiring. And again, not something we would necessarily choose willingly, but here it is, and they're doing it.
And we also, when we can't do something in order to keep our kids from feeling something, and we're just kind of left with all our feelings, it's super uncomfortable, but it's caused a lot of parents and kids to reach out for help that they might not have ever asked for when they needed it. It's been almost like an unveiling in that way. And I know it sounds completely backwards, but for me, I'm just so happy for our kids that we had a moment in their childhood where they had to really just do something difficult.
Yeah, I totally get that. And our ability to talk about it also, this is terrible.
Yes, and everybody's collectively.
Yeah. All those things, we don't have to pretend that any of that isn't happening.
And we don't have to picture a picture on Facebook about how great it is, even though it's really not. Like, there's nothing to say. There's just a whole lot of just authenticity that feels, for most people, if they're not taught, if kids aren't taught that there's shame in that, it feels just true. Yeah. And it's just, that truth is really, really good for our kids.
Yeah, totally. Amen. So I can only imagine how challenging this has been to be on the front lines with healthcare at a time like this, and being with parents who are petrified and feeling anchorless. But I'm wondering what has anchored you, if there's been one piece of wisdom that you've carried with you, or something that's just sort of become your North Star and guiding light as you get up day to day and do this work.
Sure. Probably, one of my core sort of beliefs is that, we really can't control our circumstances. We just can control how we choose to think about them. Mm. And I don't mean to imply that we should always choose to be happy about things, but that we get to choose. Yeah. And so some days I really choose to be overwhelmed and sad and angry or any other number of negative emotions. But I do know that I have that agency, and it has really helped me to decide like how I want to show up during the pandemic, what I want to model, even if it's just sadness, and really just own that I get to decide that even when our circumstances are things that we can't control. And that has just really never been more true in my life than now.
Wow. And when I think about Yom Kippur and these holidays in general, one of the spiritual truths that comes to me with every prayer over and over again is that that truth that so much of life is truly out of our control. And the only thing I have to some agency around is like, how do I relate to this life, which is fragile and vulnerable and unwieldy and unpredictable? And how can I choose wisely?
Yes, and just create sort of the outcome. It really is how you show up in the world.
Yeah.
And just knowing that you have the power to that doesn't make you feel like such a victim to so many circumstances right now that feel like we have no control over. Yeah. We still get to choose. Yeah.
And when you think about your own sense of purpose in the midst of this incredibly challenging experience, I'm curious if your own sense of purpose has changed, has it shifted, has it just been amplified?
Well, I went into pediatrics as a career for a lot of reasons, because kids are precious, most of them. But the main reason I went into pediatrics was to heal kids, to prevent disease, to help manage disease. And, as a mom, I know quite well, and also just witnessing the parents who I care for, my purpose has shifted a bit in the sense that, I really know now that our kids' wellness really depends more on us than on someone like me. And so knowing how powerful parents are in their kids' wellness, the lens that they give their kids over what's okay to be happy about or sad about, whether or not they believe things in them or they don't believe things in them, the pressure or the judgment or the worry or the fear that they parent with really affects our kids' wellness in a way that is way bigger than ear infections. And so I really felt called to doing a lot of work to heal kids through parents, just sort of helping parents really feel more confident and navigate parenting in a way that helps them show up for their kids in a healthy way, that adds to their kids' wellness, that builds their resilience and makes parents feel like they have a lot more agency. And so it's a different way to heal in that sense, but it feels purposeful and powerful and important. And I think that has probably been my biggest shift.
Amazing. Wow. Well, Hope, thank you so much for spending this time with us and sharing a bit of your journey that I'm sure will resonate with so many of us in different ways. And I wish you and your family a happy and healthy new year. Thanks for being with us.
To you as well. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start by just thinking about the impact of COVID on your field in the arts.
Yes.
And it has affected every aspect of our lives in every possible sphere. But I'm wondering how you might characterize some of the things that have changed, and also if there are things that have changed that you feel like will never go back to the way that they were.
Yes. So, I will never forget
what happened when it suddenly came to a drastic, excruciating halt. For the Symphony, it was March 12th of 2020. We were about to perform Ravel's concerto with this amazing pianist who had flown in from Paris, Jean-Yves Thibaudet, and we were about to do the dress rehearsal, and then our CEO comes on stage and was, like, everybody needs to go home until further notice because of COVID, and of course we're all shocked. Our conductor was in from Wales, and I remember his words were like, "Have a nice life, everyone."
Oh my gosh.
Which was really scary and heavy, and we still haven't seen him, but so it was traumatic. And then soon after that day, we started hearing of orchestras around the world and in America that were either completely shut down or just firing entire staffs and musicians, and it was terrifying for us. Luckily, the North Carolina Symphony, and we are so grateful to our donors and our patrons and all our loyal supporters for keeping our lights on this year as we quickly went to Zoom. So, thank goodness for technology. The technology we have has just been really overwhelming and amazing. Yes. So I was asked to do my first Zoom concert probably a couple months after that, and that was for like a small group of donors, but it was from the comfort of my living room, which was odd because in my living room there's carpet, which is not the best sound for violin especially. Right. And then they said to me, "Okay, you can play whatever you want," and in a way that was amazing, to be presented this platform and I could play whatever I wanted. But, of course, I didn't have my ensemble that I love and cherish playing with. Right. So luckily, though, I did have two fine little musicians in my house. So I did end up playing a trio with Chloe and Cameron. I transcribed like the Chopin Nocturne, and we ended up playing together, and it was so much fun. It was really awesome and probably stressful for them, but I think a good experience all in all. But and I thought it was a beautiful experience because we had never actually done that, so that was new and fun. And then there's a bunch of solo repertoire, so that was great. And then also I teach at UNC, and that I think it took maybe 2 weeks to go onto Zoom. And, that has not been as bad as I thought it would be, other than, not being able to hear crystal clear, like the sounds. Mm-hmm. Still, it's, I can't reach out and touch my students, and kind of fix their hands. Right. But all in all, it's been a pretty good experience. And a positive thing that has come of this is, even an old congregant here who I taught before they moved, I don't know how many years ago.
Yeah, like 11 or 12 years.
11 years ago. So, we got in touch, and they're in Seattle, and I was able to teach him for a couple months before he went to college. So that, that was a really great experience. So, and the fact that every time I put a concert together on Zoom, I'm able to show it to, my brothers in Chicago or my family across the ocean, or, so it's wonderful.
With the constriction and the limitation has also come some possibilities for expansiveness and
100%.
Greater reach.
Yes, which is magnificent.
So when you think about one blessing and also one loss that's come from this year, this experience, specifically with your experience in the world of the arts, what would you say? A loss and a blessing.
Okay, so the loss is definitely not having that human live in-person exchange that we get when we're in the concert hall or in any concert space. So, it's been such a, any performance I've done on Zoom. Most of them have not had an audience, and so, all the musicians live for these moments when, we're giving like our heart and our soul and everything we have. And then, we feel the audience giving back, and it's this interchange and this togetherness, and, it feels like time stops and we're all in it together. And these are, some of really the greatest moments of my life have been during that exchange. And to not have that anymore is very sad and a huge loss.
Yes.
So, but that being said, we're on our way back. So, this is all positive. But a hidden blessing has been, as soon as everything shut down, I experienced life with my family, which every single night, which, I really hadn't experienced, ever being home every night, not having a concert. So, and being creative, and, all these creative projects that have come out of COVID, with concerts, I mean, just the whole, I did like a small concert where I put together like a little silent film to it, or like everybody started getting super creative.
Yes.
So, there have been so many blessings. And then also just the realization of, that we need each other. And I think that's an important realization.
Absolutely. And I resonate with all of that as a rabbi. I think about, in prayer services, obviously it's not a performance per se, but it's all about gathering. We're in the business of gathering, and what happens when we're connecting as humans in the same space.
Exactly.
And though it has been generative and creative to come up with all of these technological workarounds, like there's nothing like sharing physical space and that energetic exchange, exactly as you said.
Exactly.
So I'm thinking also about if there's been some wisdom, some Torah, informal Torah, wisdom of your life, maybe something that's been taught to you by a guide or a mentor or your family that has really anchored you through this challenging year.
Yes. So I have a few that I love to share. So of course my family, first and foremost, has been, Brian, my parents, my in-laws, like just the support and the love. I mean, there's nothing greater, and my kids, I have to say, there's nothing greater or better than that and more meaningful than that. So, and more specifically, Brian, and, he always is telling me, you can do things that, I don't think I can do. And he always is supporting me to go for it. And, and then my dad who we laugh in our family because he always has this phrase that is keep pitching. So basically what he means is, don't stop, keep going.
Keep going.
Don't, take the time to, I remember when I first had Chloe and Cameron, I felt like I shouldn't take any time to myself to, I wanted to give them everything I had. And he reminded me how important it was to not lose myself and keep practicing. And, he made me take like 2 hours at least a day to just practice, because he knew, how important that is for me, really for survival. And then my mom, who, when I was asked to do the Four Seasons in January with the Symphony, because of different cancellations and, travel restrictions, certain soloists weren't able to travel to North Carolina, so they kind of asked me last minute, and it was like 30 days before.
Wow.
And of course I was like, wondering if I could do it, and I kind of consulted my mom, and she of course was 100% behind me and encouraged me, and said, of course you can do it, and I'm so appreciative of that. The other person who's not in my family, who I kind of always fall back on or like look up to, and he's kind of like my musical hero, is Yo-Yo Ma. And, yes, and everybody loves him, and I have like quotes in my house of his and articles just because, he reminded me during this pandemic, especially when, you see so much loss and tragedy going on and so, people getting sick and, there's so much of that going on. You kind of feel like, oh, I'm a musician, like who cares? And why is this important? Yeah. And then I would kind of, I would follow him or read his articles or listen to his music and he's such a reminder of how important it is to connect with people. And that's what he's all about is, he gets out on stage and he wants to make your life better, like then, and it does make your life better, and so that, it just kind of kept me going and, just so happy to be playing music still and realizing the importance of it and how important that connection is. Yeah. So,
That makes so much sense. And I have to tell you, it's a different artistic expression, but we have an artist in residence program in the mikvah. So we always have artists. And my vision of our mikvah space was that there would always be an element of art, not only for the beauty, but for the creativity and the generativity and the depth that it brings to the human experience, without which we are truly impoverished. And over the course of this year, as we kept the mikvah open and I would go in, and of course we're doing all the things to keep each other safe, I would look around at the walls and I would just feel more whole. And I don't 100%. Know how else to say it other than like a field like music, which I could imagine feeling like, this is not required per se for survival, but it is required for survival. Yes. It is. I feel that more than ever.
100%. Me too.
So when you think about your own sense of personal purpose as it aligns with like your greater purpose as an artist in this moment, what would you say, and how has COVID impacted that sense of purpose?
So I definitely, the whole idea kind of, through my musical hero, like what we were talking about, of really trying to make people's lives better. And in my case, professionally, it's trying to make people's lives better through music, because that's my human expression. And that's, so composers like Beethoven, who's bringing messages of freedom and unity and peace in certain symphonies, like Beethoven 9, Ode to Joy. Then, Mozart, who you experience really love and bliss in any second movement you listen to of Mozart's. And then you have the human expression of Shostakovich, which is fear and tragedy and pain, suffering. And, through COVID, there was so much of this, and disconnection and loss and then leading to anxiety and then depression and I think it made it, just like we were talking about, how important the arts and connecting with people and the togetherness and connecting through a work of art and in my case through music and understanding each other is a way to make life better. And I'm glad I can have a small part of that.
Yes, and so are we. We are the blessed ones because and you model for us so powerfully and beautifully what it is to know the language of your soul, and then to try to speak that as powerfully, as manifest as you can, because it becomes a blessing not only for you but for all the people around you.
Thank you, Jenny.
So thank you for spending this time with me and with us. Wishing you and your family a good and healthy new year.
For you too. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Thank you for being here, Alan, for sharing with us. You have sustained a company through the pandemic. And one of the things that I'm thinking about at this time in the year is
how COVID has changed our world, of course, but specifically the field of business. So I'm curious if there's some part of your business that you feel like has changed and is unlikely to go back to the old ways.
Sure. I actually think there are a couple of fundamental things for us. One, I think we've all experienced, and that is the nature of a virtual world. So in my business, a lot of the work that we did were meeting one-on-one with individuals, with clinicians in their practices around the world. And that completely pivoted to virtual. And I think people have recognized the convenience and the ease with which that can happen. And even as we've seen some less stringent lockdown, people haven't changed the desire to have that virtual. So that's one. And the other is more fundamental, and that is businesses are understanding the importance not just of the physical health of their employees, but the mental health of that their employees. And in part because they themselves are experiencing precisely what their own employees are experiencing.
Yeah, I've definitely seen the way in which certainly COVID has revealed discrepancies in terms of how different communities have been more or less vulnerable, but also are democratized it. And there's been a sense of leveling the playing field of all of our humanity.
Exactly.
So as you think about one blessing that's come as part of this experience, and also one profound loss through this experience leading your company, what comes to mind?
So they're actually both the same thing, different sides of the same coin. So, and it is back to that sort of virtual nature. What we do is so holistic that our teams working together, being in that physical space, is about how we learn and improve the services that we offer and our own skills. And not having that ability to tap a colleague on the shoulder to ask a question has been challenging, and it's been a loss for a lot of people. But on the other hand, as you said, we are a global company, and in the past, it felt different if you were in Raleigh versus Bangalore or London or wherever our employees are at. You felt when you weren't here that you were other. And the one thing that happened is that we aren't all entirely equal. We were equally disadvantaged and equally advantaged, and we actually became closer as a company and felt more connected, even though we were far away, than we ever have when we were just living in an in-person world.
Wow, it's fascinating. And I know from personal experience as a leader in this community that leading through a pandemic has provided new challenges and opportunities for leadership. So I'm wondering if there's been one or two pieces of wisdom or learnings that you've gotten from a mentor that have helped anchor you through this time of incredible instability.
So it's going to sound a little cliche, and it was not just words from one person, words of a lot of important people in my life who said that doing the right thing is never wrong. And business is so much about trying to make thoughtful, planful decisions, that you take time to figure out what is the right thing to do. And you trust your gut, but you try to go with facts. COVID was the opposite of that. In COVID, we had to make decisions quickly, and we had to trust that our heart and what was inside would lead us to make the right decision, and regardless of what it was, that we would be able to sustain and move forward. And that has proved itself incredibly important for me and for my company.
Yeah, and that is inspiring to me also in my work and in my life, because also sometimes doing the right thing is not the easy thing, and certainly challenging to have to make these decisions in such a reactive way at times, but with a spirit of responsiveness. And finally, I'm wondering if there's a way in which your own sense of personal purpose has been elevated or shifted. How is your own personal sense of purpose aligning, with the work of your business in this COVID atmosphere that we're living through?
It's strange for me because I sort of kept my business and my faith separate. It didn't seem like one informed the other, and it was always about balancing those two things. Going for the high holidays meant being away from work, and what was I going to do? How was I going to arrange my schedule to make sure that happened? And what I realized in COVID is that how I respond to the world and how I respond to the company is much more about my faith and about my Jewishness, that it actually made it easier. I don't balance anymore because I'm recognizing that they're not mutually exclusive, and that I am not a businessman who happens to be Jewish. I'm a Jew that happens to be a businessman.
It's so beautiful. And it's such an inspiration and inspirational charge for all of us, whatever we do, that we can show up as whole people in our lives, and that our Judaism, our spirituality, our traditions need not compete with our professional aspirations and obligations, but that they can work in tandem just to make us more of who we are and the best at what we do.
Exactly.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome.
Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.